شكرا دكتورة سحر وعرض شيق
Thank you, Dr. Zaher, and your presentation is very rich. I think that we should have studied before having it presented. We cannot study it that fast. We are suffering from thirst. We are thirsty, so please, could you bring us water? We're gonna be grateful to that, to you. Before we start, as panelists, before we speak, I have some things that I would like to share with you, some general points, and then we are going to start with the panelists, 6 minutes for each, because there are so many, and I'm going to comment in 1 or 2 minutes. My only comment is on the future needs. And I'm going to stop here a bit. And I'm going to take a few words of Dr. Hossein Badrawi with respect to vision of Egyptian vision of 2030. I have problem to see the problem to see the vision clearly as an industrial sector. So when somebody asks me about my future needs, it's difficult for me to answer because I cannot see clearly, I as industrial sector, what I'm going to have in the future or what's going to happen to me in the future. So without having the context and the comprehensive context and the comprehensive framework, the answer is going to be difficult. And those who have conducted the questionnaire and the respondents were lacking vision. And that's why when they were asked about the current and future needs, they are the same almost, because they say that means that they wanted to say that they did not want. And now we are going to start with engineer Ahmed and move in that direction, and then open the floor for questions. Thank you for your invitation, and thank you, Dr. Amla. Thank you, doctors, for the presentations. I have a small question, Dr. Sahar. In the sectorial and geographic analyses, have you neglected or missed mentioning the male and female, and how many males do we need and how many females do we need? Or you neglected this point to just to consider the equality of gender? Because in other studies, the females and males were representing an important factor in other studies. I have 5 minutes to go. We need to see the educational inputs or the industrial inputs, capital, lands, and importance of training or of laborers. How many students of the kindergarten do we have? How many in the primary? How many in the preparatory? Who dropped out from the females and the males? And who joined the secondary? And who joined the technical education, agricultural, industrial? And so on. We have, after analyzing these numbers, we are going to find out that people resort to do the system or to the technical education. The Don Bosco and Mubarak call those who deal with the from 14-year students to the 17-year students. And if we analyze this age and these numbers, we are going to know how or why people prefer the dual system, and after joining the university, how they were qualified to the university. And after the 22-year or the 23-year-old, they will need reforming or training to match the needs of the labor market. What you have mentioned, and I totally agree with you, that we are working on two levels, the level of the parents and the students and the level of decision makers. When I started to work as a public servant, we were in the board of directors, like 15 person. People wanted to work on the industrial committee, others on the taxes, and so on. We were in the investors committee, and then we had the committee of the training and the dual system. They asked me, or they told me, that's why you are not preferring a field. And I found out that
انا حابب ان احنا كمان نعمل فوكس على
I would like us to focus on our sector, each and every one on his own sector. Technical education. With respect to construction materials, we have 9 sectors with respect to the construction materials, and we need training because our sectors lack trainees, and it's difficult for us to work without training on safety, training on security, and training on professionalism. But people accepting to have labor or a worker in a cement factory or a similar factory, this acceptance or this perception is not that, still is not that developed. Those, for example, who work on mechanics or on maintenance, like technicians, specialists in marble, in bricks, in tubes, those who work, for example, to maintain these things. And geographically speaking, we are going to find that in the Upper Egypt, they are more interested in the construction material. And that's why, as you have said, that dealing with the dual system has established a database of the technicians and the mechanics that are ready to work in the Upper Egypt. So it's easier there to obtain the trainees or the employees, but it's difficult inside Cairo. So the big institutions or the big businesses are those who are able to understand what's training and why is the training. We suffer with the small businesses to make them understand what's the training and what are the needs of the training. And they are not ready to sacrifice with the materials or with the time. So, but the big businesses can bear more this burden. Sectors like the quarries, they started to train the trainees and do the master training. And once they finish the training, they go outside Egypt for 6 or 7 or 10 years. And after these years, they come and add value to the market.
هو أنا مش عارف إزاي هقول الكلام ده في 5 دقايق، بس أنا هحاول يعني.
I don't know how I'm going to stick to the 5 minutes. In the beginning, I'm glad that we are talking about the vocational training, because this means that we have laborers to train, or workers to train. I see personally that we do not have workers, we do not have laborers. The state started to construct industrial cities and encourage the factories to go outside the cities and go to the industrial cities, but unfortunately the population was not transferred to the new cities. For example, like Alexandria, the Burj Al Arab city. It's a disaster. We do not have the population transfer there. Consider the fact that there are so many factories and there's high demand on the workers, and thus the factories now are required to transfer the laborers from different places, from Kafr Dawar, from Amaria, with high expenses like 700 Egyptian pounds per month, and they take like an hour and a half to go to work and an hour and a half to go back home, and they have after that to give good productivity, and at the same time factories are required to train them. So when you look to the training and say, okay, to train somebody, the barrier to entry in the ready garment sector is with high density, and we have factories with 16,000 workers. So I'm a little bit biased to the ready garment sector, and I'm convinced with the fact that they have developed Bangladesh, Vietnam, and other countries like Ethiopia. But unfortunately, we have all the resources, but we cannot benefit from them. The poverty rate in Egypt is huge, and at the same time, we cannot overcome this. We have an unemployment, and we cannot overcome this. Where's the problem? In my opinion, the biggest problem has to do with the geographic distribution of the work. The ready-made garments factories now move from a place to another, because they have to reach out to the laborers or to the workers. They leave, for example, the Ashr min Ramadan city, go Beni Suef and Minya, because they lack workers in the place. So the job opportunities now are for the sectors, or the job opportunities now are as well moving and not stable. And this leads to migration, internal migration, and this leads to what as well? To that you have to have lands, enough lands, you have to have utilities, you have to reproduce the training processes. So the population density from who you can have laborers, this is the number one problem. The training of workers, what happens is that we train them in factories, and they are paid, they have full salaries. They take, like example, full salary, not 500 Egyptian pounds like in the past, and the competitiveness decrease. And when we compete in the exportation sector, we compete with China and those exporting countries. There was a Chinese investor, and I found out that our workers are 60% competent only from in comparison with the Chinese workers. So by the end, the competency does not exceed 60%, because there's not continuous training for our workers. There's conflicting ideas. When you say, for example, that now we want to train those of Mubarak Call from 16 to 18 years old, we tried to train them, and we found out that in Burj Al Arab and in the remote areas, they told us that they have to work for 6 hours and not 8 hours. So are we required to transport the workers 2 years earlier than the rest of the people? and stay in the factories, and then the ILO comes and tell that this is child labor. So we go to the Ministry of Manpower. The Manpower tells us you have to keep them. Then the foreign auditors come to us and tell us, no, you have to dismiss them. So what shall we do? Or are we going to increase the prices and the salaries so that each person is going to lose the competitiveness because the inflation has ended the profit because of the devaluation? So I think that we have to identify the regions with workers. Either we transform them to the industrial cities, or the state starts to take the whole population to the job opportunities. And with respect to training, we do not have any problem to train people, but we do not find the trainees. And second thing, we assume the expense without any return. And thank you so much.
شكرا يا دكتور.
Thank you so much, and I'd like to thank the Center for organizing this important meeting or conference, if I may say. We have been waiting for long. We have been talking for 10 years on the importance of TAVET, not only in industry, even agriculture, or even personally speaking, if you need a carpenter or a plumber to fix your home, you would find it very hard to get a highly qualified worker. They might fix something, but then break another thing. So they will go, for example, to fix the electricity, but they might break any other thing. I'm sorry to say they don't have the ethics also of the profession. We also established the Training Industrial Council. I think you were my colleague here. The government invested 500 million to support this council, and private companies were engaged on the basis that they can reform technical and vocational education or training, but it disappeared. Ministers changed, and Dr. Tariq also is really keen to develop that, but I'm a bit concerned that if he leaves the ministry, we might go back to square one. And we have this problem not only in the Ministry of Education, but all over the cabinet. You have a minister working on certain projects, and then the minister changes, so all these projects would be considered cancelled, and all the effort exerted would be in vain. So let me go back to what you said, Ihab. Industry today in industrial zones outside residential areas are problematic, because I cannot blame workers. I can wear their hat. No, I wouldn't say they are not committed, but personally speaking, it's hard because, for example, I work in food processing factories. We have in the 6th of October city, we have the 10th of Ramadan city, and 10 years ago I went to Bani Suef, to the southern area of Bani Suef. There are many problems, especially in the 6th of October zone, because we don't have enough residential areas there. So, for example, workers would take an hour and a half to go to Alexandria, for example. No, but in Cairo, it might take them 6 hours to commute, plus 8 hours to work. And then they need to sleep at least 8 hours, and then 2 hours to eat, drink, and to care for the social life. No, there is no life whatsoever. That's why workers don't want to come and work in a factory. In the 6th of October factory, they will work hard with no decent pay. It's very hard. So here we are referring to unskilled labor in the 6th of October. In the 10th of Ramadan city, it's not a problem because people come from Belbais and other neighboring areas. In Bani Suef, when we established the factory in 2010, 2011, we have many workers coming to apply in queues. They came in droves. I'm serious because there was no job opportunities there. So people were very thrilled to have a factory there, and they went even to complain to the governor because I wanted to employ people who are less than 30 years old. And then the governor talked to me, why do you want to employ people who are 32 years old? So people were committed and were interested to join. Of course, you need to know how to deal with workers. So we want to have industrial zones next to residential areas like Delta or like certain areas in Upper Egypt. I'm trying to think as if I were a worker because the situation is problematic. Second, let me refer to gender equality, and you referred to that in the ready-made comment. But I will talk about that generally. 45% of population are not employed because women are not allowed to work after 7 p.m. by virtue of a law. It's a fact. Especially those who work in factories. So people will say, okay, employ them only up to 7 p.m. Okay, what about the shift system? If female workers leave at 7, then how can we organize the shifts? So some potential are not utilized because of the labor law. Also, female workers in food processing industries and maybe in the ready-made garments, female workers are very committed and are very important. Let me refer now to the law. It's in favor of the worker and not the employer. So we also suffer. So workers would come to think that they will not be terminated whatsoever. It's a kind of Catholic marriage where divorce is not even possible. So even if these workers misbehave, you cannot do anything. So of course you train people on the job, and then all of a sudden they might leave to go to work for a certain company with a better salary, and then they would just leave you right away all of a sudden. Very briefly, training is very important, technical education is very important. Secondary education in Egypt may run from 3 or 5 years old. In Europe, for example, engineers or accountants might study in 3 years. But now you want people here in Egypt to study for 5 years to be technicians or workers. Why so? I am the head of the Greek Egyptian Council. And technical education abroad is very simple. The certificate is accredited by the Ministry of Education in Greece, and this education is a 2-year program only. So like a very simple building downtown where people study and get trained. You have people working in electricity, in automotives, in psychotherapy, even in sound engineering. So do we want to focus on industry, or do we want to train people, or we want to employ already and highly trained and skilled people? So first of all, we don't have skilled labor, so the value added is pretty poor, and the quality of industry is not in line with the best practices because they are not trained. I'd like to stop there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank the center and, of course, Dr. Abla and Dr. Ahmed for the commendable effort they exerted in the survey, because these figures might serve as an eye-opener, and then we can come up with different solutions for the existing problems. Of course, I join my colleagues in what they said earlier, because this is very enriching. I work in the printing sector, and this printing sector is related to all the other industries in Egypt or in the Chamber of Commerce. So, for example, food processing or engineering products or cosmetics or pharmaceutical products, all these products need to be packaged, of course. And this packaging should be high quality. And this will affect the ability to export. Also, from a culture point of view, printing has to do with culture, with books. So, quality is key in our sector. Previously, books, for example, especially textbooks or school books,
كان مأخوذ بشكل مقبول وطبيعي، فكانت الجودة الحقيقة متدنية.
were not given due attention. The quality of textbooks was low, and now the ministry wants to change that. Now Egypt wants to export, and the trade deficit is being studied carefully. And based on the studies we conducted with the IMC and with the FAI, Europe imports for printing books $5.5 billion. China exports $1.5 billion. France, England, and the Netherlands are the biggest importers for these products. How much do we export? Not more than 10 or 12 billion dollars. Why so? First, because the product is not of high quality. And if the Ministry of Education cares to improve the quality of textbooks, in order for our students to study high quality printed books, then we need quality in everything. And the state cannot see the value or the return from this investment. And we try to send this message. Let's assume that the state encourages printing in order to improve the export. What do we need to do? Of course, we need to increase our investment in this sector. We need to include or integrate technology. We need to open new factories, so on and so forth. This sector is not really a labor-intensive industry, but it's technology-based. The survey referred to the fact that this sector needs highly skilled and trained workers. If we increase our investment, we might not be able to find local workers in Egypt. So if you want to employ high-skilled labor, you will not find that. So yesterday, I went to the Philippines to employ workers in the new lines. So there is severe shortage when it comes to skilled labor in our sector. If we want to export and increase our productivity, Cairo is very problematic when it comes to the printing sector, because workers want to work in supermarkets, for example, or in shops, or as tuk-tuk drivers. And tuk-tuk is very problematic, of course, in some residential areas that might provide a solution, but it's problematic, especially in Cairo compared to Upper Egypt, for example. Labor turnover is very high, so even if you invest in training, we cover this cost, but at the end of the day, these workers might leave to work in any other different places. So labor turnover is a major challenge in my sector, for example. So the problems include lack of skilled labor and lack of the culture and the ethics of professionalism. So here we are asking, how can we train workers? Okay. What about primary education, which is the base for technical education? You cannot start training from secondary or post-secondary school if these people were not introduced to basic ethics, to basic principles, to discipline in their own primary school, because you need discipline. And we need to start really early on. We need to start from primary education. So we cannot speak of reforming vocational and technical education without reforming primary education to improve basic behaviors and to improve basic concepts. Yes, we need, or we are forced to use commercial secondary graduates rather than industrial secondary schools. We have to accept commercial students that were never trained before, and we need to train these people like on the job training or pre-service training. I don't want to talk for long. I referred to the main points that should be tackled or taken into consideration if you want to improve our sector. Thank you. Magued, George. I work in pharmaceuticals and I am responsible for the exporting council. Here I'm referring to cosmetics and pharmaceutical products in general. I don't want to refer to the quantitative elements, but rather the qualitative area, the level of education, not only technical and vocational training, but education in general is of low quality. Accountants or teachers might not draft a letter properly. So we want to achieve the numbers we need, but no, instead of having 10 unskilled workers, we might employ 4 skilled employers. So in my factory, I might employ 5 workers. Abroad in Europe, they might only employ 3 workers to operate the very same machine. So for example, in the Export Council, we try to train people on logistics, quality control, etc. The culture of training is as follows: sending an employee somewhere. So I tell people that 2-day training will cost 300 Egyptian pounds, and they would think a lot before accepting this offer. But let me tell you, what is the impact of training, for example? If we want to export more in my sector, we have brands in Egypt, local brands, we are not international brands. So we can only work in Africa, for example. But what if we want to go to Europe? We need to understand their mentality, their mindset. So we need to think, whom should I contact in Europe, or who is the main contractor, or who is the main exporter? Italians, of course. So we went to Italians and we told them, your market is now in China. What is the alternative? Oh, instead of working with China and you have time, the difference, what about working with us? And yes, people were interested in working with us. They wanted to have us as subcontractors. But the first condition was training. So in 2010, we started the technological industrial zone with Siena University in Italy. Unfortunately, the project stopped after the revolution. You know, the rest is history. But the importance of training is key. The ITC and the IMC, and I'm a bit surprised that they're not represented in our conference. They are responsible for training the workers. The concept we adopt in ITC and in IMC is as follows. You know, when poor people from a village travel abroad and then become very rich and they want to go back and help poor people. So instead of building a school, these people hired private tutors for each poor student. So we want to hire a trainer to train a company. But group training is not common. So whenever I ask for trainers to train companies, they will say, no, we have a very limited budget. Despite the fact that the collective training might serve 20 companies at the very same time. So given the limited resources, we need to change our mentality set. So we are working as if we have high resources or many resources, which is not the case. Now, training in certain industries is key. So vocational training is not common. I am the oldest one in the Chamber of Pharmaceuticals, and I have never heard of this thing. We need to have, for example, a supreme council for each sector, and this is not a big deal because we have the chambers of industry in the FEI, and we can list our needs. The problem is that we work without needs assessment study. Maybe we can study the needs first in line with the FEI, then we can have a top-down approach from the specialized industries. But of course, needs vary from one sector to another. And you have service industries like electricians or plumbers or carpenters. We need to fill in this matrix. We need to know the needs first in order to design schools or institutes accordingly. If we know how to think, then we will be able to do so. Last but not least, industrial cities. For example, the 6th of October, people come from El Fayoum. And it's very hard to commute. And of course, we will not stop operation in this city, but we need to take logistics into consideration. So you have two lines coming from coming to the 6th of October, the access and the ring road. So you need to study these roads at peak times. Maybe you can start a bus line or a subway line in order to save time, to save transportation costs, so on and so forth. One of the district governors said that if we start a subway, then we would encourage people from Cairo to work. But we need to change that mentality set in order to save 6 hours of commuting on a daily basis. Logistics is key, and if we take that into consideration, we can save time, effort, and money. We just need to rethink or to review our thinking, simply put, to think out of the box. Thank you. Thank you so much for all your insightful comments. I'm a bit optimistic. We can do something. I hope not after 20 years from now. Of course, geographical distribution is key. I'm involved in that through NAS Academy. It's there in the 6th of October city. We provide trainings in automotive industries in general, and it's a private sector company. And I have to say that engaging private companies is key and is of crucial importance, because the private sector is active in training or reforming education in all its stages. They also work with the university education, but they don't work a lot in vocational training. People are not willing to invest money. They might want to invest money in schools or in universities, but not in vocational training because of the mental image of workers or the public perception of workers. I'm also involved in developing the industrial zone in the Suez Canal in Sharq Port Said or the eastern part of Port Said, and the state is keen to develop that particular area or zone. Again, they started digging tunnels, and we want to develop that area. But where are the workers? First of all, the line of the canal does not include many workers. And there is also a security dimension to the problem. Again, let me take a step back. When we study the future needs, for example, without having a clear policy for sectorial and geographical and industrial needs dimension, we would have duality. Like we have something in theory and another thing in practice. We have 2030 vision, but the measures on the ground are not in line with this vision. Dr. Abla, we have 15 minutes for Q's and A's. Yes, the floor is yours, and then Dr. Hussam. Thank you so much. What you said is very important. Dr. Abla, this should be integrated in the analysis, because for me, the study is concerned. For example, 52% see that training is not important, or previous training is not a precondition, for example. This is shocking for me. 70% don't ask for university graduates or highly skilled workers. A remark was said about people enrolled in technical education. If you start from grade 1 up till university, we can assume that 100 students start in grade 1, and then 80 will complete their education up till their prep or middle school. And then 30% of these people will go to technical education, because people consider this as the parking lot. And then 30% out of these 80% will go to public education. From 18 to 23-year-old, 30% only have access to higher education. The average in the EU is 50%. We stand at 3%. And the rest of the Arab countries stand at 19%. So, speaking of figures here, we have a major challenge. Second, the survey or the representative sample that was aligned said that 10,000 job opportunities will be generated in the next few years, and 4,000 existing job opportunities. You need in Egypt, in Egypt, we need 1 million job opportunities on an annual basis. This means that it's impossible to cover that through local investments. We need FDIs. If Egypt Vision 2030 is the basis or is the reference, we need FDI of 40 or 50 billion on annual basis, then we can cover, for example, 15 billion. Then what about the rest? Here, I can find a decision that was issued that people cannot invest in education with a percentage that is more than 20%. So what is the message you send to the international community? What is the message? You said that because education is a national security thing. What about health and transportation? People with dual nationality will be considered expat or foreigners when it comes to FDIs. Why I'm saying so? Because at the end of the day, without having a holistic approach that adopts a top-down approach linking together transportation to education to geographical location, people will be working in silos. People will be working in isolation. This is the case. This is the basis. This is the starting point here in 2005. 14 years ago, we should have policies allowing people to be professional based on competences and on permits and on engaging private sector. We need to unify the naming of the professions nationwide. We need to identify the competences. We did not reinvent the wheel. The text is quoted from the standards of the EU, but no government used that in a sustainable manner. Back to policies. I'm sorry to say that and stress that, but everything is politics or starts from politics. If we have a holistic political view, then the problems will be disappeared. When you refer to the access and the 6th of October city, I knew the conversation you referred to when it comes to the subway. Someone said the same. And by the way, when the access was designed, investors covered 50% of the coast. Supposedly, we should have 4 lanes right and 4 lanes left with a subway. And people said, no, we shouldn't have a subway here. And that was the opinion back then, and that's it. It's impossible. It's unthinkable. We cannot take strategic decisions based on immediate feelings or immediate impressions. If we all agree on Egypt 2030, or even if we agree of 60% of this vision, then it's better. We can, of course, revisit that vision because the dynamics change. But international standards of the technical or of TEVIT were not implemented on the ground. it's provocative. This is the 10th time for me to discuss the very same things. How can we have good governance in Egypt without linking all these elements together? Thank you.
شكرا للدكتور حسام. انا هاخد اتفضل حضرتك عرف نفسك. انا هناخد من الفلور.
I'm going to take questions from the floor and stop and then take comments. Engineer Hani tells me that I am a dictator, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to comment. Dr. Hussam, I'm equally provoked. When we were talking about the Industrial Training Council, it has been this idea has been for like 10 years, and then nothing was implemented. So I'm going to comment on the foreign direct investment and the job opportunities that we need. There is a crowding out, and this started because of the multinationals that are existing in a sector like the cement sector. And after the privatization, the private sector and the multinational were dominant. What happened afterwards is that there was a competitiveness and they started to lose, and the multinational now contact each other. So unfortunately, you try to get the foreign direct investment, the FDI, and at the same time you're working against this direction, so the profit is zero. Dr. Ali Abdel Ghaffar, I'm the board director members of Information Development Center and a professor in Banha University. Thank you, Ms. Abla, for the invitation. Thank you, panelists. I just have some comments in the questionnaire analysis conducted. You focused on the industrial businesses, while the technical education, as you know, includes industrial, tourism, agricultural, education. You have not taken the opinion of the hotels, especially the TV2 project. Third of this budget are on the touristic schools and the tourism faculties, especially the tourism, of course, contributes hugely to the Egyptian economy. The four-dimensional roadmap, I think it's going to contribute to the development of the TAVET in the whole Egypt. But you now focus only on the local market needs. You have to have a detailed study on the needs of the labor market at the regional and international levels as well, especially that our graduates are needed in the North Mediterranean region due to the lack of the new generations or young generations. And this is a treasure for us to export our labor to the North Mediterranean region and South European region to get hard currency. For the sake of the state, of course, or for the sake of the country. So you have to focus on this. Thank you so much. Adel Amer, I'm parliamentarian for the Qanatir al-Khairiyya. Thank you, Dr. Abla. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees. In fact, there's a point that I just want to focus on with respect to developing the technical education. Today, as Dr. Hussam has mentioned, we are working without having a comprehensive roadmap through which we can identify the needs of the Egyptian labor market and the situation of our economy, and this has to be clear with clear mechanisms and the timelines. Today, the most important factor in the system is the human capital. When you identify the outcomes of the technical education. You can find people with certificates, but without any kind of skill that can contribute to the development process or the advanced technology, or to have a language with which they can work in big companies or businesses. The second thing, inside the schools, we can find group of departments that have to be integrated. This integration is not there within the same school. We have a department like carpentry, with decoration, with electricity, with technology. All these departments, they cannot have a unified product with the quality, with international quality standards. So afterwards, to talk about a productive school, this school itself could not achieve integrity and integration, and people cannot buy their products. Why? Because they are working in a bureaucratic and complex circle, and thus citizens refuse to deal with the school and to communicate with the school. The technical part is not there in the curricula. So I wish to have a comprehensive vision and to have communication and coordination and integration between all the parties, all the stakeholders. They have to sit together and by the end have a common product and a common vision that contributes to the vision 2030. Parliament might intervene and issues legislations that can support this integration. And thank you so much. Thank you. I just have two requests. Mr. Said Sadiq, Under Secretary of Ministry of Industry, he wants to comment, and Dr. Zaher has a comment. So we start with Dr. Zaher. I hope it's not a criticism to the questionnaire. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. My comment is with respect to the design of the questionnaire. It happened in the center. The implementation and the collection of the data was conducted by the CAPMAS, and this was during 2 months. So this means that we do not ignore the rest of the sectors, but it has to do with our ability to cover all the sectors. But this does not mean, of course, that we did not neglect the rest of the sectors. The next study we are going to conduct covers the rest of the sectors, nursing, tourism, and so on and so forth. With respect to your question that has to do with the females and males, we have a gender analysis. Jobs are classified according to the gender. ICT, Dr. Magued, was cancelled. Thank you. In the name of God, Saeed Mustafa Siddiq, the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Education for Budgeting and Mapping. Thank you, ECES, and I'm so glad to be here among these cadres of technical education in Egypt. I'm going to take some words of the Dr. Zaher. She was running in the presentation, but what I could grasp was what had to do with the hierarchy that do not reflect the future trends. And thus I'm going to tackle 3 points. The first point, the question. The future trends. Do you mean Egypt Vision 2030? Well, the current indices with all the specializations, are they the key objective to have a sustainable economic development plan in Egypt? If that's the case, we have to prioritize the current industries so that we can map them in the Ministry of Education to allocate these specializations, occupations required. This is a question. I have the answer because now we are currently developing the new map or plan for next year 2020, and Ministry of Planning has delivered to us what has to do with the 2020 plan. We have 5 objectives, 5 targets, and some pillars. I do not want to tackle the details, but we need to sit together, and this is the suggestion. So many questions now have to do with who is the godfather to adopt this. In my opinion, the Ministry of Planning is what develops the Vision 2030 of Egypt. So I can make use of the capacity of the center, the ECES, and give us the opportunity as Ministry of Education, in addition to the MOPMAR, Ministry of Planning, and all the industrial parties of Egypt to sit together in a workshop, in a forum, or anything to talk about the future trends. What's the role of the Ministry of Education? What are the required occupations? What are the competences required to work on them according?
That was the proposal I really wanted to make. I have something to complain of or to blame someone. We played a role in this study or this survey, but we were not mentioned or credit were not given to us. First of all, I apologize for not mentioning the whole team or everyone who contributed. And of course, the Ministry of Education was there, TAVET Education, the Ministry of Manpower, Dr. Mohammed Al-Fatih, Mr. Mohammed Al-Sherbini from ITC, Dr. Mohammed Samir. So sorry, my mistake, my bad. Second, we will present a roadmap including all the stakeholders and the godfather. So Zaher presented the findings or the results of the survey that was conducted by CAPMAS. So we analyzed the result, and in our second session we will compare the existing system to international best practices, and then we will present a 4-dimension roadmap. So this is just the starting point. This is the springboard. So we stir the still water, because we cannot work on isolated islands without having a solid needs assessment study. So we need to discuss a lot. This is just the starting point. And we wish we can play a role. Of course, you will be involved and you will get to see your part in the roadmap. Maybe we can take 2 other questions. Very briefly, please. Dr. Abir, Assistant Professor, Future University. I'll adopt a different perspective. I worked with the GIZ on TAVET, and the focus group was youth. And I cannot see graduates of technical education. With all due respect to all the attendees, there in the focus groups, we talked to the youth, and their own problem was the culture. They are not honored to be workers. It's problematic when it comes to getting married, for example. They don't feel proud about their own job.
So to have them as technicians, they need like 5 years, and then they can take from 6 to 12,000 EGP. If you tell them what do you want, they are going to tell you, I do not want to continue working. So before talking about 2030 vision, Egypt, and so on and so forth, I was in MOPMAR for 3.5 years, so I know how to develop an action plan and a vision. But what matters is to get from bottom to up, to take it from those who are enrolled in the technical education, identify the problem, then reach out to the industrial entities, and then develop the vision. And that's it. Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Shuruk Zidan. I'm the executive director of the program TVET Egypt or TVET 2. Thank you. Because you have clarified the fact that we are not working on the right thing, because we are lacking awareness on what's going on. It's true that 10 years ago we did not have a clear vision on the tablet. But today we have a strategic framework, we have a clear vision that are integrated into the modifications of the Vision 2030. We have policies, legislations that have to do with how to make sure with the fact that there's need to institutionalize any effort conducted by any entity on all levels to avoid the problem that has to do with any modification that could take place does not affect the what's currently being conducted now. We have all the international criteria and all the standards of ESCO. We are currently reviewing them with NAQA, and we see how to make sure with the fact that the occupation levels have to be internationally recognized and have skilled workers, and with the Ministry of Education and other ministries like the competent ministries that work on the training centers and the higher education, we work on developing all the curriculum. So this not might not be clear because we are afraid, especially with the private sector. Private sector lost the confidence in the fact that the state might intervene, and thus they know that the state is not going to do anything, so they do not want to participate in the development process. But there is a private sector that conducts individual efforts and participate with us to develop curricula for the TVET system, not only the dual system. Because I believe in the dual system, but by the end but how many schools do we have for the dual system? Among these millions of graduates, we have like 770,000 that are graduates of the TVET, and the dual system have like 50,000. So if you're talking about dual system, fine, but I need to look to the block of the laborers. We have laborers, but the key problem is that each and every governorate has its own nature. So you were talking about the governorate of Port Said. This is one of the governorates that are difficult because youth do not believe in working. They believe in that they after graduating from the school, they're going to take certificate and have a factory, for example. We talked about how to have gender consideration and how to have equal opportunities. Thus, the private sector has to have best practices so that a female can work in different sectors, not in the sectors that are known with women and female, because there are private sector schools that were established for construction and building, and they have females. So because they decided to modify the policies. Thank you, my colleague from Future University, because she said that there is no representation from the technical education. It's true. that the technical education youth see themselves as unworthy, but the state tries to solve this problem by having technological universities, by having new curricula. In 2020, by 2020, in 2020, we have technical education schools that implement these curricula to develop and to all the occupations, by the way, were changed in the technical education. And yes, we know that there are problems that have to do with 3 years and 5 years, and we know that we have problems to do with the labor system, and we know this, and we work with all the competent entities and all the ministries and with the development partners. We work on one table to see how we're going to solve these problems. The key entity that up till now has not been engaged is the private sector. So my question, what is the role of the unions or federations? When I work with the Egyptian Federation for Industry, with the Federation of Tourism for Building and Construction, but they are not able to convey to the partners and members what's the development taking place, and cannot make them participate in the development process. So this reflects, of course, miscommunication. Thank you. I'm going to stop here. We have to conclude because we have comments from the panel, and Dr. Abla gives me we should finish at 12, and now it's 12:20. Mike, please. Mike. Mike. Sorry, the speaker is not using the microphone.
طيب انا خليني بس، انا عندي في البانل. طب اتفضل حضرتك وبعدين احنا.
Go ahead. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful, Dr. Muhammad Amara, head of the technical education sector. Adding to the info for the Ministry of Education. Adding to the info mentioned by Ms. Shuru, and fearing the fact that some of us might leave before the end of the day, I would like to clarify to you that there are efforts exerted. I'm going to mention them in points, and in the third session, we're going to tackle them in details. The technicians, the graduates of the schools, with respect to their training currently, we are reviewing all the technical programs. We cancel the programs not required by the labor market to introduce new programs needed by the labor market. We are working on 150 programs, educational programs from March 2019 up till now. We have developed more than 36 programs in cooperation with the labor market through a methodology developed by international and local experts. With respect to the curricula and the programs, they are based now on the competences required in the labor market. So labor markets now say whether what skills do they need in the graduates. And to make sure that we have quality, we conducted training for the teachers, and thus we conducted or established an academy for the teachers of the TAVET, because the Academy of the Ministry of Education does not tackle the technical aspects, and thus we have now a special academy to train the teachers of the TAVET. So, in fact, For the programs to be of high quality, we have a current legislation that we wish to continue by having a special committee on technical education programs. Thank you. Quick comments from the panelists before we conclude. As Dr. Hussein Badrawi said that on that there are 1 million graduates yearly to go to the labor market, and this and the relation between this and FDI. And with respect to TAVIT, that the private sector is not aware of what is going on with respect to the training. We are in the FEI, we know that, but the private sector faces problems, so many problems, to the extent that they are solving problems so that they cannot work on training. We have problems with electricity, water, services provided, with taxes. So from my position here, I would like to tell Dr. Abla and the center to conduct a survey or a study on the expense or the cost of the state, assumed by the state, for those who are unemployed. If we have 100 million graduates, what if we do not give them job opportunities? How much is it gonna cost the state? And then we can see this cost and divided it and take it out of the cost of the training. If we do not do this, we are not going to train anybody. We're not going to have FDI. We want to give the investors the opportunity to invest appropriately and make sure that the state is going to give them the revenues. Thank you. Quick point on the FDI. They taught us that investors, when they go to a certain country and see the locals, whether they are happy or not, if you talk to any businessman and find them happy, then you have the FDI. Before that, nothing happens. The second thing, there are misconceptions that I want to correct. With respect to textile sector, from 60 to 80% females. This is worldwide, so it's the best sector for this field. But back to the key point, I cannot say or talk about training and development and neglect the human resources. When I depend 60 to 80% on females and they are required to go 2 hours or to spend 2 hours to go to the work, this is an issue. This is an issue, a problem of the state, not of the private sector or training. The state has to transfer the employees to their working place. I am a private sector. I'm responsible for creating job opportunities. The key problem, in order to avoid any negligence, the problem is the lack of the what we can call the raw workers or the raw employees. So we have to focus on this. With respect to youth and salaries and so on, with all my due respect, the average salary of the workers is 3,000 EGP plus. Because I'm talking about the textile sector. It employs more than 1.5 million employees in Egypt. I'm not talking about the local production, I'm talking about the exportation. So it's a big sector. So the average wage is very high, the benefits are high. It includes from 18 to 20, the age group is from 18 to 20. The last point, technical education is very good if we talk about the management. Forget about the employment. Anyone who has a factory now to find a planner, a producer, or merchandiser, to find these employees, this is a disaster. I can have an announcement on accountant, and I have 1,000 CV. And when I ask for an accountant for ready garments, I find 0. Dr. Magued talked about quality versus quantity, and you mentioned 750 and 50 of graduates of Joy System and Tabit. I do not care about the graduates. I have to care for the quality of the graduates. Number one. Number two, anyone of Tabit can conduct an exercise and send anyone from Don Bosco and interview them, and those of the Mubarakul and the Tabit. If you interview these 3 graduates, you're going to find out the quality of the graduates. We have programs for skills, and we have an initiative. We had initiative in 2009, and in the construction sector, they asked for 300 graduates of Don Bosco and Marble as well. The industry, they ask for the Don Bosco graduates. Why they do this without asking for the graduates of the TIVET? This is an accumulated experience. This Don Bosco is one entity. Or Don Bosco is funded by one entity only. And the rest, the TIVET and the Joel and the Mubarakul are funded by so many entities. And this explains why the quality of Don Bosco is high and the quality of the other graduates are not that high, are not equally high. Thank you for all. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists. Please keep the hope. And just an announcement for the rest of the agenda. Now we have a coffee break for 15 minutes.